stuff on the cutting edge is so important. Hearing the people that are doing the work right now talk about what they're doing, the problems they're encountering, how they plan to solve it, etc. Getting involved outside of your profession.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget, CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMify in the show notes to learn how. My guest today recently retired after 38 years of service at Louisiana State University in Shreveport, where he chaired the Department of Physical Therapy and eventually became the inaugural dean of the School of Allied Health Professions. So let's hear my conversation with Dr. Joe McCulloch. So I want to welcome everyone to Prescriptions for Success. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today because we have not only an interesting guest, as always, but I'm having an opportunity to speak to an old friend. So Dr. Joe McCulloch, thanks so much for being here and welcome to Prescription for Success.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Well, I hope to have a lot of fun and learn some things about you that I didn't already know. Not that I haven't had plenty of opportunities to know plenty, but what we want to do, as always, Joe, is sort of talk about your career trajectory. I know that, well, I was about to say you grew up in Sumter, South Carolina, but I don't know that to be the case. Did you, or did you merely graduate from high school there?
No, I'm from Sumter. Spent my first 18 years there before going off to college.
All righty. So you began your college career at University of South Carolina.
Correct.
And it looks like from my research that you had your eye on physical therapy from the very beginning. Is that right?
I kind of did. I started out in high school. I knew I wanted to do something in the health careers, and I very much wanted to work closely with people, helping people. So I started volunteering, and I volunteered for several years as a high school student in the hospital in every department I could get into. And I ran across physical therapy at that time, but it wasn't until my aunt, who lived in Morganton, North Carolina, when I graduated from high school, she informed me of a summer position that was available at a center for developmental disabilities up in the Morganton area. And she told me I should apply. She was always pushing me to go to college and all of this. I was the first person in my family to make it to college. So I applied for the job in a physical therapy department and got it. And so I spent 2 summers, as it turned out, working in the Western Carolina Center in Morganton with these children that were fascinating to me. I knew nothing about developmental disabilities at that time. I knew nothing really about physical therapy and learned a great deal. So I decided to pursue that as a career path.
I want to take an opportunity to answer a question that I expect a lot of people have, because the pathway to a career in physical therapy has changed a good bit over the last 30 years or 30, maybe 40 years or so. And at the time that you made that decision, was it a 2-year course of study to get certified as a physical therapist, or were they in the 3-year period? Tell us where you were.
Nope. Back when I went, back in the early 70s, it was you had 2 years of college prerequisites, and then you went to physical therapy school for the final 2, and then clinical rotations. But
I see.
yeah, it was a bachelor's degree back then, and then it moved into master's, and now it's a mandatory doctoral degree.
So you did your 2 years at USC, and then you moved on to Medical College of Virginia for your last 2 years. Is that right?
Right.
What brought about that decision?
It was primarily driven by the fact that South Carolina at that time did not have a physical therapy school. And they had worked out an agreement with Virginia that they would take a limited number of students, because there was only 30 students in a class back then. And I happened to be one of the lucky. No one else from South Carolina applied to MCV that year, so luckily I got in, and it was a miracle because, I always said, being in physical therapy education all these years, that I could never have made it into the profession if I had to go through the standards we have nowadays. It's just, it's a real challenge for students wanting to pursue this career path nowadays, because it's there's just so limited number of positions available, and highly competitive.
Knowing your level of intellect as I do, I have a feeling that you're underselling yourself a little bit, but I appreciate you clearing that up. So at that point, you were qualified to begin a career as a physical therapist, but yet you wound up joining not really a branch of the military, but something close. What was it that sent you to New York City?
Well, I was when I graduated in 1972, we had that military obligation for the Vietnam War.
You betcha.
And I was, deferred. I was deferred all the years I was in college. But when I graduated, well, actually, it was very strange. When I was on my clinical rotations, I got a call to go for my physical, and I would tell them, well, I'll be happy to, but I'm not in Richmond anymore. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina on a clinical. Can I have it moved to Greenville? And so they said, sure. And they, moved me to Greenville. Well, by the time it got through the government paperwork to get it moved to Greenville, I had then moved on to Charleston, West Virginia for a rehab rotation. So I told them, well, I'm not in Greenville. And so after the second time of that, they said, you're just trying to avoid the draft. You're now automatically 1A and subject to the next call.
No kidding.
So, oh yes, they weren't playing around. Well, my heart dropped, and
I bet it did.
I graduated from PT school and passed my boards, and a gentleman in Jackson, Mississippi hired me to come and work in his private practice, which at that time he was offering me $1,000 a month, which
Holy cow.
In 1972 was amazing money.
I'm saying.
So I said, okay, but I told him about this draft obligation. He says, well, we'll work with you to get into the National Guard or something. So I got down there, and sure enough, I took the test for the Air National Guard, and they told me I qualified to do whatever I wanted to do in the National Guard. And first of all, I didn't want to go in to begin with, but I had applied to the Navy and to public health for commissions. And I got within a 1 week period, I got a letter from the Navy telling me I had been commissioned in the U.S. Navy. And then the next week, I got one from the Public Health Service telling me I had been commissioned in the Public Health Service. So I had a choice to make. And public health was a much more interesting environment for me, just because it was not military really, and you only went into the military service in an absolute war, in which case you'd go into the Navy. But so I turned down the Navy commission, and my roommate at that time actually took it. And what was so funny about that is my college roommate from PT school was already in the Navy, and he got a notice that I was showing up, to be stationed at his base. And so he was looking forward to me arriving when another friend walks in the door. But I did get the Public Health Commission. Nice thing about public health is they commission you at one rank higher than the Navy. So I went in there as a Lieutenant JG, and it was all uphill from there. That was the most amazing experience of my life. A little South Carolina boy. When they told me I was going to be stationed in New York City, I said I didn't really care, because I was really ready to get out of where I was at the time. And so I went up there, and boy, did my eyes open. What an experience that was to see the city and the type of practice we had. We basically had an independent practice back in the 70s, where that's just happening in the last decade here all around the states. And so, physical therapists love being there. Physicians, not so much. They would rather have been out in their private practices or doing other things. So they just kind of sent everything to us. We took care of anything musculoskeletal at the time. And that's really where I got my first exposure to wounds. I had a patient come in with a diagnosis of Hansen's disease, which I had no clue what that was. So I quickly did some research and realized that was leprosy. And so I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going
to. And this is while you were in New York?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'll be darned.
Because the public health service provides care for the Hansen's disease patients.
Of course.
It's one of their beneficiaries. Yeah. So, I quickly learned that I was not, subject to getting leprosy from this individual. And, was just amazed by the disease process. And so much of what I learned at that time and then later when I transferred to New Orleans, helped me in managing persons with insensitivity, insensate foot and all of that.
Yeah, that would certainly sort of explain your rather intense interest in wound care as the years went by. And you actually used those years, I gather, to get some more education. That's where you got your master's degree, is that right?
Yes, I did. While I was in New York, I had the opportunity, through the GI Bill, to work on my master's at night at NYU. So I finished up there in my master's, and right after I finished my master's and turned in my master's thesis, my major professor is just a real go-getter to this day. She's just a dynamo. She, when I got down to New Orleans and moved into my apartment, my dissertation, my thesis was sitting on my doorstep with all of her corrections with a note.
Wow.
Get this turned around and back to me in 2 weeks or something. It's like, gosh, I didn't get a chance to breathe. But so, yeah, I got that taken care of there. And then I started my doctoral studies while in New Orleans.
Yeah. And got right to work on your PhD. I mean, this is truly a story of being always in the right place at the right time. And couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, I'm going to have to say.
Oh, thank you.
Let's take it on from there. I guess you continued in the public health service until the end of your military obligation, and then did you look for a faculty appointment at LSU, or did it find you? How did that work?
Well, again, it was kind of, everything falling into place at the right time. When I was stationed in New Orleans, I was sent there as deputy chief at the Marine Hospital, which really opened my eyes. In New York City, I was in an outpatient clinic, primarily musculoskeletal with a smattering of other things. But when I got to the Marine Hospital, we actually divided ourselves into teams, and I was put over the medical surgical team as opposed to the orthopedics team. And so I got to learn a great deal more there, and that it was in that position that I got to see all the wounds. And, that was in the day of Whirlpool being the real reason that patients were sent to physical therapy. And,
sure, yeah.
I was whirlpooling them with the best of them. When one day I had this epiphany. It's like, why am I putting someone with venous congestion into a dependent position in warm water and letting them sit there for 20 minutes? And so that was when I started really rethinking how to manage those conditions and started working with intermittent compression and all of that. But as far as leaving the service, I was in that time when Reagan came into office, and he decided to downsize the public health service. So he closed down the Bureau of Hospitals, and your choice was, if you stayed in the public health service, you either were stationed at a Indian reservation or in the Bureau of Prisons. And I really did not have a desire to go to either of those places in that point in my career. And I had been doing some adjunct teaching with LSU in their physical therapy program, and so they jumped at the opportunity to have me come on faculty, and so I did, and they allowed me to, teach as well as, get my work towards my doctoral degree. So I joined LSU at that time, and they shortly later sent me up to Shreveport to see about opening a new program in Shreveport, and here I've been ever since.
And I want to talk a little bit more about your education. Of course, the physical therapy part of it speaks for itself, but when you began to work on your doctorate, it was more in the area of education, as I understand it. Have I got that right?
Correct. That was, really kind of driven by the fact that I was going to be a teacher. I knew a lot at the time about my subject matter, but didn't know a whole lot about, how to deliver it in an effective manner. And being, a person that likes to engage people and all, I just didn't want to be the talking head in the front of the classroom. I really wanted to do a thorough job and become the best teacher that I could. And I had a great major professor at the University of New Orleans who allowed me to interweave all of my medical side of training into the education. Matter of fact, they were enamored by more people coming in. We had dentists come from the dental school and all and start joining this doctoral program too, because they were very much engaging is making this, not the K through 12 type of education, but true college level education and professional level education. So, every project I did had something to do with what I was doing at work at that time or research I was doing or whatever. It was just a very functional degree for me.
Yeah, it sounds like, and led to a very substantial bibliography, I might add. I'm continuing to be a little curious about any further experience that you might have had with Hansen's disease. I know that it first happened in New York, but being as the only leprosy hospital, the last surviving leprosy hospital in this nation was, in fact, in the New Orleans vicinity. I don't know if the hospital was still open when you arrived there or not, but
oh, absolutely.
Did you have any experience there, and what was it like?
I did. We, like I said, I was stationed in New Orleans, but there was also a duty station at Carville at the National Leprosarium, National Hansen's Disease Center. And we got to go there periodically to learn more about prosthetics and also about, Hansen's disease in and of itself, treatment of the insensate limb. And, it was there that I learned total contact casting.
Really?
And this was back in, think about this now, this was back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
When we were doing this and have been doing it ever since. And we were some of the initial people that started teaching this at the wound care conferences. And now you hear, people talk about total contact casting like it was the neatest thing since sliced bread. Well, they are so late to the game. I mean, this is something that's been out there for decades, and it just, people stayed away from it because it was so time consuming, to do it. And now they've, made ways to make it a little quicker and more modular. So, but yeah, we did contact casting from 1979 going forward. So.
Attention healthcare professionals. Have you lost control of your career? Do you feel like you need to hit the reset button? If you're tired of uncertainty, struggling to find balance in your career, frustrated with pay cuts, extended shifts, or insurance aggravation, well then, it's time for you to change your life and carve out the career of your dreams. Join Dr. Jarrett Patton and others at Licensed to Live, the conference, July 8 through 10, 2022, live from the Bellevue in Philadelphia. Explore the vast possibilities available to you as a physician or healthcare executive and ignite your career into the life you desire. Hear from expert healthcare professionals as they offer actionable, dynamic, and inspirational information, and get ready to leave inspired, ready to create the career you love, licensed to live. It's time for you to be happy. And as an added benefit, all attendees become subscribers to receive the print copy of Physician Outlook magazine. For early bird reservations, go to rxforsuccesspodcast.com/live. Did you ever have the opportunity to have any contact with Dr. Paul Brand, or was he gone?
I met him one time.
Yeah.
He gave us a lecture one time, and it's funny. A neighbor of mine just recently loaned me a book he had read about Carville, and it was after it closed it finally closed as a leprosarium and Hansen's Disease Center, but because by law they were allowed to stay there, many of the patients elected to stay at Carville. They didn't want to be moved out into the community for various reasons. And so the clinical side of it moved into Baton Rouge, and they opened a center for the insensate limb there. So they took care of persons with diabetes as well as persons with Hansen's disease. But many of them stayed there. And what they did with the remaining part of the facility is they moved in a federal prison. So you had federal prisoners on one half of it and patients with Hansen's on the other side. And they were not supposed to mingle, but this book was fascinating because the guy would talk about how he met this one person, and I was like, I know that person. I've seen that person. That was just so weird, and to see that. But it carried on. I think it's still open. They can still live there, though. Other options have been made available. Many have moved out into the community.
And I sort of offhandedly mentioned the name Dr. Paul Brand. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit more about exactly how important he is to the disease, the Hansen's disease?
He really is. Matter of fact, the total contact casting concept he brought back from India. He's a plastic surgeon who, an orthopedist. I don't know if he's orthopedic himself or all plastics, but definitely a surgeon who did, multiple surgeries to correct deformities and, deal with these individuals. But he learned the whole concept of contact casting when he was at a facility in India, and he brought that back. He was a very devoutly religious man and just a super gentleman. He is Carville.
Indeed, and in terms of people who have had an enormous impact on any particular disease process, I think there can't be anybody that matches Dr. Paul Brand, and that must have been very exciting for you to learn at the feet of the master, so to speak. Let's talk a little bit more about program building. You seem to have picked up on the or developed an intense interest in doing exactly that, and that, as far as I can tell, sort of describes your career at LSU. So would you like to give us the elevator pitch version of how that worked out for you?
Sure. Again, it started more back in public health, where public health was known as a place that you sent students from schools when they really wanted an intense exposure to something. And when they came in, they were expected to hit the ground running. We gave them lectures every morning for an hour before they saw patients. And this went on and on, where we started, specializing in areas where we developed a complete wound care type of team. So students now could come to the public health service just for a wound care rotation, where before you might get a smattering of it when you went to do a medical surgical rotation or things of that nature. So, we started developing that, and, as we got better at it, connected with the vascular surgeons in our facility, and we're starting doing research, and we publish, various papers on, treatment of venous insufficiency, and this evolved on later into, the management of patients with insensate feet, the diabetic population, which is just rampant right now. And so we developed all of these programs that carried over, and this has now become a significant component of practice. People, as you know, we have a specialty organization that allows people to become certified in wound care, multidisciplinary certification. So I was integrally involved in getting that off the ground early on, and still am today. But other, initiatives that came about, we said we were the first group to ever publish on using intermittent pneumatic compression to treat an active venous ulceration. We always talked about it to treat, varicose veins and things of that nature, but to actually heal a venous ulcer via compression was, we did the first case study on that, and then followed that up with subsequent studies down the line. We instituted total contact casting in all of our facilities and made that a routine. Later on, one of the things I was involved in as wound care started to really become a specialty area. the conferences that you and I attend that are sponsored by health management publications way back when, they were integral in helping us get started a group called the Association for the Advancement of Wound Care, which was a multidisciplinary group. And I served on the founding board of that as a secretary. And, that was a group that has really grown over the years to be an advocate for patients.
And really unique, I might add. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that, because in terms of healthcare practitioner groups, I just can't think of any one that meets the definition of multidisciplinary more than that group. And I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about that and what it was like trying to bring all those disparate groups together, and were there challenges along the way?
There were. I mean, people were ready for the organization because it was just a meeting that occurred, once a year, that all these different professions came together, and they would have, a physician speak at this and a nurse speak at this and maybe a physical therapist at this. And it was multidisciplinary in that regard, but it really wasn't. I mean, people were still in their little silos. And so forming this group, you really brought in a multidisciplinary board. You had, all food groups represented there on the board. And, we got together and, it was a great time for sharing our knowledge base, because people would not understand, well, what's a physical therapist doing, with wound care? And it's like, well, let me tell you. And, why are you doing such and such? And so you got to learn all these things, and it came together. It had troubles along the way. Any organization, you see that as new leadership comes into the picture, that things might change drastically. The pendulum will swing, and someone will come in who will be, very dictatorial in how they want to run something, and others, are much more, group focused. And I'll admit, I had a falling out with them within the last decade when they started to look into connecting with a group dealing with specialization and allowing them to, bypass some pathways that I thought people should really go through to get specialized. And so, I expressed that to them. And, I think things have changed now. The group is much more cohesive and, doing a great job. They are connected with the Alliance for Wound Care, which works on helping get, federal laws passed that give better Medicare and Medicaid coverage for persons with wounds, and making sure that some of these dressings that we use that are very expensive, that there's pathways to get those covered through third-party providers, et cetera. So that group is very, very engaged in that regard, and is still very multidisciplinary. You don't have to be any specific credentialed individual to hold any office in that group or any committee chair.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say again, for emphasis, I practiced medicine as a surgeon for 44 years, and I don't recall any other organization bringing together so many different levels of expertise under one tent, and really changing the way things are done, and really having an impact on the way care is delivered. And I'm sure that you must be proud of having been a part of that, and rightfully so. The next thing I want to talk to you about is probably one of the most contentious subjects that ever comes up in a conversation with medical professionals, and that is, how do you prove that you're qualified to do what you do? And the answer is always, well, you got to take a test, right? And you were instrumental in setting up just such a test to set the criteria for essentially all of those disparate groups. So tell us about that little adventure.
Well, I got a call one day from a gentleman down in Florida who was a podiatrist, and he said that a group was getting together to form a specialty board that would, offer certification for people in wound care, and it'd be multidisciplinary certification and all of this. And I was very skeptical, like everybody else. But my thought was, I would rather be looking at this from the inside than, being on the outside, throwing darts at it. So let me see what it's all about. If it turns out to be valid, I'll stick with it. If I think it's a bunch of hooey, then, I will, beg off. So I did go and serve on the first board, which at that time was called the American Academy of Wound Management. And this group did start out multidisciplinary, and the first people that were certified in a contentious manner, and that was by portfolio. So there was no test to be taken at that point in time since one had not been developed. So, a group of supposed experts in the field, those who had been around, had published, and were educators, etc., got together and reviewed their credentials and decided who would get this initial certification. We rapidly from that point started moving ahead towards the development of an exam, because we knew this was not the way to go, that would not hold weight, that people truly had to show a common knowledge base, and you don't know how much of the stuff was in portfolios was factual, puffed up or whatever. So we began working on the first exam, and boy, was that an arduous process.
Kind of glad I missed that part.
Yeah, we had to first get people to write questions, and you would be amazed, probably not, but at the quality of the questions that were submitted. They were just horrendous. People, including teachers, do not know how to write test questions. They give the answer away, or they give you two good distractors and they put two silly things in which couldn't possibly be answers, and that totally changes test statistics and all of that. So we got together with a psychometrics firm in New York City and started working on test development, where we brought in subject matter experts, again, people who were known in the field, and that's the only way you called them an expert. They didn't have any other real credentials there. But, they were the ones who were giving the lectures and doing the research and all. Brought them in and had them either A, write questions, or B, help to edit the questions that had already been submitted. And this went on for months and years until we got a test together that was piloted, and we did they do a study where they actually send it out to as many people as you can get your hands on that are working in the field, and ask them what their day-to-day practice looks like, which ones of these things that we're thinking of testing on are things they really do or think should be included, and all of that. And this was all pulled together into the initial test that was offered. And then from that point on, it was all testing for certification. And the test was constantly evolving as the field changed and the way we did things changed. We would, drop out certain questions, add new ones, and these data banks grew and grew. They finally decided years later they wanted to move towards more of the board certification, with the ultimate goal being for physicians in this group to be able to become board certified by the American Board of Specialties, which is very hard to do.
Very hard
to do. And so, we started to try and do things that kept the group together as a multidisciplinary certification. So even though a test was developed for physicians specifically, 75% of that test is the same test that any certified specialist takes. So everybody has that common core of knowledge. The physicians would have an additional aspect that's added that deals exactly with the types of things you would do, the surgeries, the medications you might prescribe, et cetera, et cetera. And so the group did finally change over then to the American Board of Wound Management, and offering a board certification, though this again is not under the American Board of Specialties. So that is still an ultimate goal, I think, as far as physicians are concerned, is to get that group. But we did get a separate certification. So we have 3 certifications through the ABWM. One is at the associate level, which is for people who do not hold at least a bachelor's degree in nursing or some health-related field. So it would be more assistants, techs, people in the industry, salespeople, and all of that. We then have the CWS, Certified Wound Specialists, which are all the credentialed professionals of nurses, physical therapists, dietitians, things of that nature. And then the Certified Wound Specialist Physician, which includes MDs, DPMs, and DOs.
And that was quite a hill to climb, wasn't it?
It was, and it's been several decades. I mean, this is still going on. This is not something Johnny come lately. So,
yeah, I was honored to work with that group for many years, and I have to say I learned about as much as I contributed, I think, but it was really a gratifying experience. But as you say, I think the holdup, as far as physicians are concerned at this point, is recognition by the American Board of Medical Specialties. And for that, there are going to have to be fellowships or residencies or whatever, which is another can of worms that, unfortunately, the ABWM is not going to be able to have much influence on, other than to say, we've got the exam for you. It's all ready to go if you can meet those other criteria.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians for physicians to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests. Whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics, Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. I don't know what to say to you, Joe. I worked with you on that board, and I understand exactly what a laborious process that it has been, and you're still at it as a board member of the foundation, and it says so much about your dedication to a truly worthy cause, and I certainly want to congratulate you for that. It's quite a full life that you've led since you left Sumter, South Carolina. What do you do for fun? You got any hobbies?
Oh boy, do I! And that's the problem. I'm in what's called, I'm not retired now. I'm in what's called preferment. I get to do what I prefer to do.
Oh man, I'm taking that degree home to my wife tonight.
Right, yeah. But I am semi-retired. I do still teach. I teach in a very demanding position right now. I bit off more than I was willing to chew, I think. I work for a company called Rehab Essentials, which they partnered with the University of Montana to offer a transitional Doctor of Physical Therapy degree. So, many people that graduated, like back when I did, finished without a doctoral degree, they're wanting to come up and meet the required standards now that are, national for the new graduate. And so they offer these transitional programs where students can enroll online and take the necessary coursework to bring them up, getting the pharmacology, the radiology, the wound care, and all of that. Well, they asked me if I'd do the wound care module, the integumentary module for them, and I said sure. And it really at that time was a matter of me taking the lectures I'd always given, breaking them down into 30-minute hour presentations and recording them. So we were talking earlier about the problems, recording these things like podcasts and all. So I've had my share of sitting in front of microphones and, recording these things, trying to sync them with slides and all. And it worked very well. The students, I get very good comments from students. We have over 100 students in a class 3 times a year and from all over the world. And it evolved into a program now called In Tandem, where the company has partnered to work with entry-level physical therapy programs where, as you can imagine, a school might have many experts in musculoskeletal PT, but they can't afford to have them in maybe neuro PT or certainly not in wound care and all of that. So they have to find other ways to get that content. And the accrediting agencies are very demanding in the criteria you must meet. So what this In Tandem group is doing is they are connecting with schools that want to get started or want to buy into this curriculum, where the school is responsible for 55% of the total curriculum, and the In Tandem group is responsible for 45%. So what this means is that for the integumentary course, I had to go down to Tampa, Florida, and record 81 15-minute audio-visual segments of all of this material over a week's period of time. So I'm standing in front of oh yes, I'm standing in front of a green screen, reading on a teleprompter, all this stuff, and they go back and do all this magic behind the scenes to produce stuff that students get in 15-minute blocks, which is about how people learn. After about 15 minutes, you start to drift. So by now, probably people in this podcast are drifting, right?
Could be.
We got to bring them back in. This is a great way, so now it gives the content experts, people who are writing the text and all of that, a chance to teach in these programs. And any program in the country can buy any module they want to use in this fashion. You haven't got to buy the whole thing. So, if you can't find a teacher to teach wound care, then you can get the wound care module and just supplement it with some laboratory things so you meet accreditation standards. And so this is going to be a great way, I think, because so much now you see in medical school classrooms, either students don't go to class, they do it all at home on their computers. The lectures are recorded, which I can't fathom,
So I've heard.
When we were in school, is if you weren't in the seat, they came looking for you. So you were not allowed to miss a class.
So you're still continuing to contribute substantially to academia, and surely you've got some hobbies. I happen to know you're
the hobby side. The hobbies get in the way. Academia gets in the way of my hobbies. I love to learn to paint. I'm not an artist. I'm taking lessons and do those. As a matter of fact, online. I have a class tomorrow from 1 to 4.
I've seen some of that work. I think you got some talent myself.
Well, thank you. I certainly enjoy it when I can get the color scheme right and all. It's a real challenge, but definitely a learning curve. It's using another side of the brain than the one I typically had to use. I love cooking. I love working on woodworking projects.
Joe, I really enjoyed this conversation. I have enjoyed getting caught up with you. I've certainly missed our semi-annual meetings since I have retired myself. So I want to thank you for spending the time with me today. And before we go, we're going to segue into what's my favorite part of the show. And I will step aside, and Dr. Joe McCulloch is going to give us his prescriptions for success.
I guess the first thing when I look at my prescriptions deals with passion, and that is to follow your passion. There were many times as I came through my career that I hit barriers or stumbling blocks where someone might say, "Oh no, you can't do that, or you shouldn't be doing that, or da 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 da." And I would just hang with it and try and prove them wrong. I can't tell you the number of great relationships I have developed with physicians over the years who may have had a differing opinion about something that we were doing, and just spending some time and talking and getting to know them as an individual and them knowing me as an individual, and then we start to share research and things. All of a sudden, we come around and we see that we can work together in many regards. So that would be the first thing, is following that passion, because if it's meant to be, it will come to fruition. You will find a path to get you there, and it just takes that perseverance, and with that, following the passion, being willing to step out and take that chance. I mean, for me, to say yes, I was going to go to school from South Carolina up to Richmond, Virginia, which was a huge city at that time for me, and then from there, moving somewhere else in the country I'd never been, and then up to New York City. My gosh, I never imagined myself would be living in New York City, and now it's just like New York City. It's not that big a deal. I go up there when I go to visit. I can hit the streets running because I've been there, experienced. I know how the streets are laid out. I'm comfortable getting around on the transportation system and all of that. And it was just because I was willing to follow that passion, take that risk, and get out and do some of those things. The second thing for me, and we kind of dealt with it here in this talk today, is to be professionally involved. Get engaged with your national organizations, your professional meetings for colleagues. And I know, in your group, there will probably be many physicians tuning in to listen to this. And when you think of engaging in the national organization, maybe the AMA or something comes to mind. And that's just such a huge organization that, we encounter the same thing with our professional organization, the APTA, where people think, I just don't want to get involved at that level on this massive organization. They get too much into the politics of things, or things that I'm just not engaged in. I really want to be involved in more of the clinical side. Well, find those organizations that allow that to happen, where, for me, I don't necessarily attend the National PT Conference every year. I might attend one of their clinical specialty conferences. What I attend is the conference for wound care, the Symposium on Advanced Wound Care, or other symposia like that come out that put me into the specialty area I'm engaged with people from numerous backgrounds where I can learn from them. And, being engaged in that has gotten me to positions where I've been invited to speak at conferences around the world. I've been engaged with corporations to do research on new products that come out. Been asked to do a textbook, which was very successful for us, and is now in its 4th edition. And so all of that was because of my professional engagement. That you can't just sit back and go to work every day and hopefully read your journal, but by the time it gets printed in a journal, my gosh, it's been years out there that the stuff has been going on. It's like with a textbook, it's probably been a decade that the stuff's been going on by the time it really hits print in a textbook. So, that getting to those meetings, getting the stuff on the cutting edge is so important. Hearing the people that are doing the work right now talk about what they're doing, the problems they're encountering, how they plan to solve it, etc. And, getting involved outside of your profession. For me, being able to work with, physicians and surgeons and specialty surgeons, like yourself, at vascular, and all of that has just been tremendous. And also with nurses and learning about nutrition. I just can't tell you how much that professional involvement has paid off for me. And the third thing for me in a prescription for success is to be a perpetual learner. I just can't, learn enough about things. It was always problematic when I would go to the library researching a topic I was doing some research on at the time. I would invariably run across 2 or 3 other journal articles that piqued my interest, and I would, go off and start looking at those. And it's like, focus, 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 get your attention deficit disorder back here on this topic at hand. But, learning is just fantastic. And it doesn't stop just at the professional. As I said, I have hobbies more than I can find time to deal with. I didn't know a thing about painting and started taking up painting. And every time I take a lecture and the teacher gives us a little technique, it's like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. And you try that and you get success, or you try it and fail and you keep trying it and eventually get success. Technology makes that so much easier for us nowadays that, again, we can go down rabbit holes. We can get started on a YouTube video on some esoteric subject and, find yourselves that hours have passed and, you just have lost track of time. But, that to me is rewarding. I just love that. If I can come away from a meeting having said I learned one thing new, then the meeting has been worthwhile for me. So often we go to these meetings and we're the ones giving the lectures, and you're like, well, what is in it for me? And then you hear a new person speak that you haven't heard before, and all of a sudden the light goes off and you're like, aha, I can take that back and use that on Monday morning with a patient I'm seeing right now. And, I'm so thankful for having the opportunity to gain that knowledge. So, that kind of sums it up for me. So just to follow your passion, to stay professionally involved, and to be a perpetual learner.
Well, Dr. Joe McCulloch, I must say, I think about as well as I've ever seen anybody do it. You definitely practice what you preach, and that's some good advice for the audience. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to share with our audience anything that you'd like to share, whether it be websites or email addresses or new books or where you're going to be appearing next. What have you got for us?
There is a university, Western Carolina University in Asheville and Cullowhee, North Carolina. They actually use the original portion of the integumentary course that I created. So they were looking for someone to come in and do 15 hours of in-person teaching, and they asked the company if they had any suggestions of people, and the company said, well, as a matter of fact, the guy who did your curriculum now lives right down the road from you. So, when we're up at our North Carolina mountain house, I'll be going over to Asheville to teach in the integumentary program at Western Carolina University for 4 Wednesday afternoons. So that's how I'll be spending that time. The other thing, majority time spent with the American Board of Wound Management, and I encourage anyone who would consider specialization to look into that. I am chairman of the foundation, and the foundation's role is to produce educational materials and help promote the exam. We don't have anything to do with the exam itself, but if you're interested in the exam, that would be woundcarecertified.org. And if you want more about educational material that will help you study for the exams, then you'd go to the abwmfoundation.org. So they are two definite groups that I would encourage people interested in wound care to look into. And then if you have any questions you want to ask me directly, you're certainly welcome to email me. My email is joseph.mcculloch, that's McCulloch, at lsuhs.edu. So joseph.mcculloch at lsuhs.edu. And I am on LinkedIn also, if you want to go that route, and I'd be happy to help anybody answer any questions I could. I still stay affiliated with LSU as their adjunct faculty. I retired as dean of the school there in 2018, but I still keep my email address with them.
Dr. Joseph McCulloch, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a great pleasure getting caught up with you, and I'm really grateful for you taking the time with us.
Thank you, and I enjoyed the time with you, and certainly send my regards to you and your dear wife.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We'd really appreciate a review from you, and a 5-star rating helps us a lot. These ratings give our podcast much more visibility, and that helps us reach more listeners. Exclusive content is available on our Patreon page, including membership-only material like personal rapid-fire Q&A sessions with our guests. And to be sure you never miss an episode, visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com to subscribe. While you're there, learn how to get CME credit from CMify just by listening. Special thanks to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.